Have you ever noticed how, time and time again, women choose men who are nothing special, average, ordinary, unremarkable? And yet here you are, someone who believes you have something more, wondering why. The answer isn't what you want to hear. It's not what you've been told. And if it stings, it's because deep down you still believe in the lie. You still hold on to the idea that the world is fair, that effort is rewarded, that things make sense. But that's not how it works. Take a closer look. That woman you admire, the one who seems different, special, the one you think values intelligence, ambition, depth, she's with a guy who has none of that. Just a simple, predictable, unremarkable man. And you? The one who tried to be different, who cultivated his mind, who worked on his best version? You're still in the shadows. It doesn't make sense, does it? But today, you're going to understand. Women don't choose what they say they want. They don't pick the best, the most capable, the smartest. They choose what makes them feel secure. They choose what's familiar, what's predictable. And here's the harsh truth. A mediocre man is often the safest bet for survival. He doesn't stand out. He isn't a challenge. He doesn't awaken insecurity. He's comfort. What a woman instinctively fears, what her psychology rejects, is chaos. And you? If you're different, if you're ambitious, if you refuse to follow the script, you are chaos. Look again. That woman could have chosen you, but she didn't. She chose the guy who won't challenge her world, because here's the real problem with men who think, who question, who don't accept mediocrity. They force women to evolve, and that's terrifying. Stability is instinct. Conformity is a survival strategy. And the mediocre man, he fits the role perfectly. He doesn't demand growth. He doesn't create uncertainty. He doesn't awaken anxiety. He's safe, predictable, easy. Now, do you see? Do you understand why so many women choose the way they do? It's not because they want the best. It's because they want what's easiest to handle. And if you're a man who refuses to be tamed, who steps outside the mold, who challenges, most of them won't choose you. Not because you're not worth it, but because they can't control you. But here's where it gets interesting. If you understand this truth, you can use it. You can decide how to move in this world. You can choose whether to play their game or create your own playing field. The biggest trap men fall into is believing they have to become mediocre to be chosen. And some do. They shrink, they dilute themselves, they become harmless. But there's another way. You don't need to convince anyone of your value. You don't need to lower yourself just to be accepted. All you need is to understand how the human mind works and move according to your own rules. Because here's the ultimate irony. What they fear at first, they will desire in time. What they reject at first, they will chase in time. The man who doesn't conform, the man who doesn't ask for permission, the man who doesn't bend, that's the man who wins in the end. So, decide. You can keep asking yourself why they choose what they choose, or you can become the exception, the one they don't need to choose, because they simply can't ignore you. Power isn't in being accepted. Power is in them not being able to look away. And now comes the question no one wants to ask. Why does it hurt so much that they choose mediocre men? Because deep down, you see it as a personal injustice. You feel that if you work to be better, if you develop your mind, if you build ambition and character, you should be rewarded. But here's the brutal truth. No one owes you anything. And here's the real trap. It's not just that women choose mediocre men. It's that you keep validating yourself through that choice, as if being chosen is the ultimate proof of your worth. But why do you need that validation in the first place? Most men spend their lives obsessed with being the chosen one. They don't say it out loud, but every effort, every decision, every improvement carries a hidden purpose: to be seen, to be recognized, for someone to finally say, "You're different, you're special. I choose you." And do you know what's the most messed up part? The moment you start seeking to be chosen, you become part of the very system you despise. You go from seeing mediocrity to becoming it, because a man who needs validation to feel valuable has already lost the game. The true victory isn't that a woman chooses you. The true victory is that you choose. You choose the world you'll move in. You choose the rules you'll follow. And you choose the ones you'll destroy. The man who understands this completely changes his approach. He stops worrying about what kind of men women choose. He becomes the force that dictates who gets access to him and who doesn't. Think about it this way. If you woke up tomorrow with an unstoppable mindset, a purpose so big that nothing could distract you, a level of self-confidence so solid that no external validation mattered, would you really care who women are with? Because at that point, you would have transcended the game. And when you transcend the game, the dynamic changes. You stop being the one looking from the outside, wondering why they don't choose you. And you become the one who chooses who is allowed into your world. That's the difference between a man who obsesses over women's choices and a man who understands that his life doesn't revolve around their validation. But there's something else, something few are willing to admit. The fear of being too big, not the fear of failure. Something worse, the fear of being so successful that you no longer fit in, that you become unreachable. Most men don't stay in mediocrity because they can't rise above it. They stay because the alternative terrifies them. Because truly standing out means being alone for a while. It means being misunderstood. It means walking a path that almost no one will follow. And here's the irony. Women may not choose you now, but they will. Do you know why? Because when a man keeps growing, when he refuses to stop, when he becomes an anomaly in the system, he becomes something far more valuable than any average man. He becomes a challenge. And what's forbidden, what's hard, what's inaccessible, will always be more attractive than what's easy. But here's the problem. Most men never reach that point because they give up too soon. Because when they see that, at first, no one chooses them. They think they are the problem, so they adjust, they soften, they make themselves more accessible. And in doing so, they lose their advantage. So listen to this. What women reject today, they'll chase tomorrow. But only if you have the patience, the conviction to stay true to yourself. If you stay in the validation game, if you keep waiting to be chosen, you'll never break free from mediocrity, even if you think you're better. But if you understand that you are the one who chooses, the one who dictates his own path, the one who rises above the need for approval, then the world changes. Because when you reach that level, you won't be asking why women choose mediocre men anymore. You'll be too busy, being the man they can't ignore. Here's the truth that few dare to face. Women don't look for the best man. They look for the man who fits into their narrative. That means they don't seek the smartest, the strongest, or the most ambitious. They look for the man who fits the story they've already created about what a relationship should be. And this is dangerous. Why? Because no matter how valuable you are, if you don't fit into that narrative, you'll be discarded. Look at it in action. Observe any woman who has been through relationships with mediocre men, who has suffered, who has complained that all men are the same. Then a different man comes along. One with vision, purpose, discipline, a life that challenges her thinking, and she rejects him. Not because she doesn't value him, but because he doesn't fit into the story she's already built about what's normal in her world. Her emotional comfort zone is tied to mediocrity. She's gotten used to relationships where she doesn't have to grow, where she's not challenged, where everything is predictable. A real man, a man who represents something greater, disrupts that stability, and her survival instinct makes her run away. Here's the part no one tells you. A woman will only change her narrative when the pain of staying the same is greater than the fear of change. That's why you see women who keep choosing the same type of man over and over again, even though they know he's not right for them. It's not a lack of intelligence. It's a mental pattern they haven't broken. So what do? Do you wait for them to realize their mistake? Do you try to convince them you're better? A man who truly understands his worth doesn't try to convince anyone to choose him. He simply moves on because he knows that sooner or later, reality will speak for him. The great irony is this: women don't respect what they can control. If they can mold you, soften you, make you doubt yourself, you've automatically lost value. Not because they're bad people, but because that's how human psychology works. What's easy to manage is never respected. Look at nature. The most lethal predators are the ones that can't be domesticated. They don't try to please. They don't try to convince anyone to accept them. They simply exist with power, and the world adapts to them. The problem with most men is this: they want to be accepted without being dangerous. They want to be respected without being able to say no. They want to be chosen without being able to walk away when necessary. Here's the brutal reality. If you can't walk away, you'll never have power in the relationship. Women don't look for the man who chases them the most. They look for the man who, even if they like him, knows he can walk away at any moment if something doesn't align with his principles. That's what generates true attraction, the possibility of loss. Because everything that's easy to get is taken for granted, and everything that can be lost is valued. This brings us to another question. How do you become the man who can't be ignored? The answer is scarcity. Everything that's scarce is valuable, and everything that's abundant loses its worth. If you're always available, if you always say yes, if you're constantly seeking approval, you become a cheap resource, one that can be replaced. But if you're a man with standards, a man who doesn't seek validation, who moves with purpose, you become rare. Because the truly valuable man isn't everywhere. He's not begging for attention. He's not trying to be liked by everyone. He's too focused on his mission to worry about who comes and who goes. And here's the ultimate irony. When you reach that point, women start seeing you differently. You're no longer the man trying to prove his worth. You're the man who doesn't need to prove it, because his life speaks for him. And in that moment, the game changes. The same women who once ignored you now feel curiosity. Now they feel attraction. Now they start asking themselves, why isn't this man trying to impress me like the others? And that's when you realize the truth. It was never about being the best. It was always about being the one who can't be controlled. But here's where most men go wrong. They think being a man who can't be controlled means acting indifferent, pretending nothing matters, wearing a mask of coldness and detachment. But that's not strength. That's fear disguised as power. Because true power isn't about not feeling. It's about not letting those feelings control you. And that's the difference. Weak men get paralyzed by rejection. They let frustration consume them. They complain. They grow bitter. They blame the world for their failures. They live with resentment because they don't understand the game. But strong men? They don't need to play by anyone else's rules. But real love has nothing to do with suffering. Real love isn't about earning someone. It isn't about proving your worth over and over. Real love happens when two people choose each other from abundance, not need. And here's the key. The one who needs always loses. The man who needs to be loved is easily manipulated. The one who needs validation will always be at the mercy of others' judgment. The one who needs to be chosen will never have control over his own life. And need is the strongest scent a woman can detect. It doesn't matter how well you dress. It doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter how fit your body is. If you smell of need, you will be discarded. Because what truly attracts isn't appearance. It's the perception of power. But understand this, power isn't domination. It's not arrogance. It's not treating others with indifference. True power is the ability to walk alone, without fear. Because when a man moves through life with conviction, without distress, without anxiety, without the desperation to be validated, he becomes an anomaly. And everything that is an anomaly attracts. People are used to seeing the same thing. Men who beg, men who compete, men who despair to be chosen. But when someone sees a man who needs nothing, a man who doesn't get upset, who doesn't bend, who moves with unshakable confidence, something inside them awakens. And at that moment, the woman who once ignored you begins to doubt. She starts asking herself, why isn't this man like the others? Why isn't he trying to impress me? Why is his energy so different? And suddenly, what was once overlooked becomes intriguing. Because mystery is the most powerful force in attraction. Not the fake mystery of ignoring texts or playing hard to get. That's childish. True mystery comes from a man so driven by his purpose that his attention is a privilege. not because he withholds it out of strategy, but because his time is valuable, because he's building, because he's evolving, because he's focused on something greater than external validation. And here's the final lesson. The man who doesn't need to be chosen is the man who ends up being chosen. Because what really attracts isn't beauty, intelligence, or money. It's the perception of scarcity. When something is hard to get, people value it more. When something is too accessible, people take it for granted. It's that simple. So here's the real question. Are you an easily replaceable resource? Or are you a scarce asset? Are you desperate to fit in? Or do you walk your own path with such conviction that the world can't ignore you? Because deep down, this was never about why women choose mediocre men. It's about why you keep waiting for them to choose you. True freedom comes when you stop looking outward for answers and start building a life so incredible that the world has no choice but to pay attention. And when you reach that level, you won't be asking why women choose what they choose anymore. They'll be the ones asking how they can be part of your world. And that's where everything changes. Because now that you know, now that you've seen the truth laid bare, you have two options. 1. Keep living as you always have, trapped in the same cycle of frustration, wondering why the world isn't playing in your favor. 2. Or do something radically different. You can exit the system. You can stop waiting. You can become a man who can't be ignored. Because here's the most brutal truth of all. Women don't choose mediocre men by accident. They choose them because they're comfortable, because they're predictable, because they're safe. But the man who isn't mediocre, the man who dares to be more than what society expects, he's a problem. And the world fears problems. It fears men who can't be tamed. It fears men who don't ask for permission. It fears men who don't need validation, because a man like that is dangerous. Not dangerous because he does harm, but because he breaks the narrative. Because he forces others to look in the mirror and question themselves. Because his very existence is proof that they've been living a lie. Because his presence reminds them that they could have been more, but they weren't. And that is the greatest threat to mediocrity. So here's the final question. Are you ready to be a problem? Because if you are, there's no turning back. When a man discovers who he can become, the whole world becomes uncomfortable. But that's exactly what you need. So decide now. Stay in the dark with the rest, or be the man they can never tame. If you understand this, leave this phrase in the comments. I'd rather be a problem than be forgotten. And subscribe, because this is just the beginning. See you next time.